Okay, we can start already.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm excited to be here to moderate this session on the recovery of the Western Balkans, the recovery after this terrible pandemic that hit the world. And today we will in particular try to investigate the connection between our plans for this recovery and Agenda 2030 of the United Nations. Are we really building forward better through the SDGs, or are we far away from meeting this vision, from meeting the target of 2030 agenda and the 17 SDGs? I'm extremely honored to be moderating a session with 5 presidents, people that have left their footprint and still play an instrumental role in their countries. Prime Minister of Montenegro, 2010-2012, Igor Ljuski. Member of the presidency of Bosnia-Herzegovina, Mladen Ivanic, Zlatko Langugia, Prime Minister of Bosnia-Herzegovina, 2001-2002, and then Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Then the President of Albania, 2012-2017, Bujar Nishani, and finally, Prime Minister of Romania, 1989-1991, Petre Roman. It is an exciting panel, and it is organized by 2 organizations that have a mission to promote the dialogue and understanding between different cultures and people for building a functional and inclusive society, and at the same time, and in particular, the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, trying to communicate solutions, sustainability solutions in all aspects of the society, the economy, and the environment that are being developed in research centers and university, and need to be communicated to the other stakeholders, the politicians, the policymakers, the businesses, the NGOs, the financial sector, the civil society, so that we can accelerate the transition to the implementation of Agenda 2030. So it is an exciting panel, organized by 2 important international networks that have a long tradition of collaboration, and I am truly honored to be chairing the European hub of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network that currently includes more than 400 member institutions all over Europe. Today, we are here to talk about how the Western Balkans can move forward better. Allow me a very, very brief introduction of the current global policy framework, and then I will give the floor to our amazing speakers in order to place Western Balkans pathways within this policy framework context. The recent history of global sustainability agenda has been landmarked by the agreement, the signature of the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030, in 2015, which has been endorsed by 193 countries. Same year, 2015, we have the Paris Agreement for Climate Change, 197 countries agreeing to collaborate in order to limit the global temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius. 2019, we have Europe announcing the European Green Deal, with 4 axes: climate neutrality by 2050, clean tech leadership in Europe, protection from pollution and loss of biodiversity, and of course, and just transition, leave no one behind. And after all this, we have, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic that up to now we've been responding to with short-term measures trying to contain the virus with social distancing and of course biomedical research and the vaccine, but also trying to contain the huge economic recession that this pandemic has brought, which basically is one of the biggest recessions, an unprecedented really recession that we are facing compared to all other recessions during peacetime. So up to now, all governments around the world have been trying to avoid the pandemic turning into a major economic and financial crisis. We try to keep the workforce employed, even if guaranteed. Governments try to channel financial support to the vulnerable, support the SMEs, support the financial system because non-performing loans mount, and at the same time, constructing fiscal packages comparable to the crisis-related loss, which will be financed by national debt. And the hope and the ambition is that these fiscal packages will endorse the long-run vision of Agenda 2030, will allow us to recover better in a green and digital way, in a way that will allow social cohesion, job creation, and in a way that will give capacity to all the people in the society so that they are not left behind. And the question of our session today is whether this ambition is possible for the Western Balkans, whether the Western Balkans have the capacity, the political will, and the know-how on top of the financial resources in order to embark on such a pathway. The European Commission welcomes the commitment expressed by the Western Balkan leaders to further strengthen regional cooperation as a way to advance on their European path. Western Balkans have had a very positive response to the economic and investment plan, showed commitment to enhance connectivity. They have endorsed key initiatives such as the Common Regional Market, the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans, and they show support for Roma integration. So given this initiative, given the plan of the European Commission to mobilize 9 billion of EU grants to spend on the region's socioeconomic recovery from COVID-19, and the foreseen Western Balkans quarantine facility, which can raise investments up to 20 billion. Given the financial and political commitment, is a pathway towards Agenda 2030 possible? I want to start today by inviting our first panelist, President Igor Ivanik, to take the floor. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
So is it Igor or Mladen?
Sorry, okay. Let me just say. So the first panelist, the first panelist is Igor Lucic. Yes, please.
Lucic,
sorry about the mistake.
Thank you, Professor.
Sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much. No, first of all, let me thank again Nizami Ganjavi International Center for bringing us together to discuss about development and discuss about Sustainable Development Agenda, UN Agenda 2030. And it is great to see my dear colleagues again taking part in this panel. Let me also greet former Czech Prime Minister Jan Fischer, who is also with us, who doesn't come from the region, but of Southeast Europe, but he's a great support and great friend of ours. I think it is really important we discussed the topics like this, because sustainable development I see as a major contribution to the overall security. COVID-19 has put on us a great burden, which also has to do with enormous not only economic but also social and security impact on our countries. And it has brought about a new reality. And obviously that new reality has also brought about major political consequences. And integration process has been put to test due to COVID-19 inability to handle COVID-19 challenges properly. We've seen a rise of forms of nationalism all around Europe, which are related to the vaccine distribution, vaccine export, and so on and so on. So many important consequences of COVID-19, which are put to test a lot of which is put to test a lot of our values, beliefs, preferences, which probably sometimes we take for granted until like put to test. And this is exactly the times when I believe turning to proper cooperation, turning to sustainable development, and blending it with the proper set of values is actually the way forward. Not only for our region, but probably more wider than that. Also talking about Europe and even globally. So as far as my country is concerned, I can't say that we've managed to handle COVID-19 in the best possible way. According to all the statistics, we seem to be one of the top, top performers in unfortunate way of seeing this in terms of the overall infection rate per 100,000, per 1 million inhabitants. We've also seen huge number of deaths, unfortunately, in the past year or so. And after a year or so, we are still under a lot of we live under a lot of measures, and it is not possible to move between the cities without proper certificates, or restaurants, cafes are only partially operational. Schools are online, and so on. So something that we saw as something new year ago, which was a solution to what we all thought should be a provisional, a temporary aberration from our normal lives, seems to be becoming an important part of our life. And there's a number of panels, conferences we attend, or we're going to attend, which discuss this new normal. One of these is, I think, in a way related to our today's topic, despite the fact that that development is in the center. So the only way forward, I really believe, is the focus on development, is the focus on sustainable development in particular. And I believe not only Montenegro, but the whole region should be taking that direction. I think it is incredibly important, the fact that it was not only European Green Deal that was discussed and revealed in late 2019, just a few months ahead of the pandemic. It was also related to the Green Agenda for Western Balkans, which you mentioned, which is very important. And when you look into the document, you'll find out that there are a lot of important initiatives which are related to our homework. I mean, countries in the region need to do a lot to make sure that we are able to respond to those initiatives, that we are able to pursue green recovery and green development if we are able to show that our societies will become more resilient. Recovery and resilient plan, which also you referred to, is something that has been discussed in Europe or agreed in Europe, but I don't think that any country in the Western Balkans has yet adopted something like that, has yet prepared a resilience or recovery plan like that. And this is something where countries in the region will have to do more. Maybe some of the countries have done it by linking it to some other development documents, some other strategies and so on. But to my knowledge, as far as I understand, it's not the case. And I don't think, except from general acceptance of the SDG and UN agenda, and probably all of the countries a few years back have introduced SDG agenda into our national legislations, I don't think that we have still given it a particular new approach, given the COVID-19 challenges and given the fact that in the years to come, the best way forward is linking to the European Green Deal and relying upon decarbonization and green recovery. And there are huge opportunities, huge potentials. But at the same time, we have to be open and fair. There are a lot of challenges. A lot of it that Europeans have put under the title of the just transition. Just transition in terms of adapting to the new realities, adapting to the new ways of doing business, adapting to the new ways of developing our society is going to be also very demanding, very expensive, very difficult, because it is not only economic cost of it, is the social cost of it, it's also a complete new set of values that we have to adopt. And unfortunately, I think that's where we, lag behind. The analyzing transition years back, when I did some of my academic research stuff in the field of transition, I figured out that it's relatively straightforward to introduce, multi-party system or to introduce economic liberalization program and so on. But unfortunately, if it is done technocratically only, if we quite often tend to forget that it is also about values that need to evolve and be accepted across the board in a society, we're not getting anywhere. And that's where we all, I believe, need to do more, and definitely where Montenegro needs to do more, despite all the successes we've had when it comes to, for example, the European accession agenda. Indeed, we have done a lot. We've opened all the accession chapters. We are kind of making steps, meeting benchmarks and so on, but there is awful lot more to be done, because and that is in a way probably also a failure of the accession process of the European Union, that it only tangentially sort of discusses and discusses this issue of how development, rule of law, reform of the public administration, and so on correlate to the values in a society. That's where we obviously need to do more. And once we do more in that particular field, it will be much easier to do more when it comes to the green recovery, decarbonization, moving forward according to what should be not only our regions, but actually the global future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Indeed, what is needed, and is not only needed in the accessing countries or in the countries that have some other form of relationship with the European Union, it is also needed among the member states. Recently, I've co-authored an SDSN report with Jeff Sachs, where we try to cross-map the European Green Deal policies, the 9 different policies of the European Green Deal, the 17 SDGs and the 169 targets within them, together with the European semester process recommendations. And even within Europe, we find only 70% alignment between the recommendations of the semester process and the challenges faced by each and every country with regards to the SDGs. So even within Europe, the semester process is not yet aligned with the ambition of the European Green Deal, which it is an ambition that is a mirror image of the 17 SDGs. And then when we proceed to do this analysis for countries that are in accession, and instead of the semester process recommendation, they have the accession suggestion process, the alignment is lower, but not much lower, it's 60%. So indeed, as you said, it is wise what you said, we need the European processes to align better with the SDG agenda. The good news is that the European Green Deal, it is a mirror image of the SDGs. So thankfully, we don't have two different visions. It's one vision, which is communicated in different structures, but it's one vision. Of course, the SDGs are a bit more inclusive, more holistic. But the good news is that we have one agenda, is the SDGs, and the European Green Deal, which are similar. But the bad news is that the European processes are yet to be fully aligned with these two agendas. And I fully agree that they should first be aligned, and then we should construct pathways that will allow us to explicitly showcase the technologies that are needed, the institutional reforms that are needed, the shaping, the reshaping of values, the social values that are needed, and of course, the financial resources that are needed to do the change. Thank you very much. I will now move and come back to you, of course. I will now move to President Mladen Ivanik. And again, I'm trying the best with pronunciation. Mr. President, please give us your view on the current recovery pathway.
Thank you very much, Professor. It's my pleasure also to be with all of you, especially to see some of the well-known faces, and hope that we will soon have a chance to see in a less artificial way, let's say a more natural way, in face-to-face, without using Zoom or any other platform. Hope that this will be a reality, because like belonging to the old generation, I cannot be a part of the new trends, sitting at the home and speaking through the different media channels. To speak about the Bosnia in these new circumstances, it's really relatively difficult. Speaking about the COVID crisis, Bosnia didn't respond very well on this crisis. Too many reasons for that. But mainly, simply it shows very clearly, the crisis shows very clearly that the government is not able to respond in a good way for the current crisis. I think that the number of the vaccinated people in Bosnia is not more than maybe 50, in the best case, 70,000 people. And the whole population in Bosnia is something like 3.2 million. So it's a really small number. And part of the reason can be, say, it's logical, because Bosnia put everything on the COVAX system, and there was a big failure in that system. One of the very clear signs of the current development is the fact that the big countries became very selfish. They think on their own interest, and I agree with Mr. Lukšić that some sort of the new way of the nationalism appears very clearly in the new crisis, and that the basic European values, it's a very big question. Are there any real basic European values in a current world that everybody is trying to protect themselves and only its own population. And this is really a big problem. I have to say that if you see the whole region, Serbia was very successful in this story, and it's a very big question why Serbia did it. Is it because of the good links with Russia, and thanks to the vaccination from the Russian side? Is it because of the good links with China? And there are a lot of very long-term questions from that crisis this day. I think that somehow it looks to me that Europe didn't respond in a good way for the crisis, and somehow the problem of the credibility of the European Union is the big question. Maybe we, like non-European countries, are not enough credible to put that question. But simply there is a question: what is the real credibility of the European Union, speaking about the common response for the vaccination? Even the example of the UK. UK is one of the most successful countries, and there is a big question: is it because they left the EU, or there is a question? That's something which is very essential questions in a long term. And for us from the Western Balkans, this is a very important, because majority of the intellectuals, academicians, they believe that the only future for the region is to be a part of the European Union. And then if you see that this is not the result, then if you see that the EU didn't respond in a quite good way, helping the countries from the Western Balkans to somehow to overcome the crisis, then the big question is, will the citizens believe that this is the long-term future of themselves? Or will they somehow create a perception that China or Russia is the best potential options? Very significant and very important long-term questions which we all have to find the answers on that. I personally, in spite of all problems, I really believe that the European Union is the only logical, realistic option. But it cannot take for a long that only some of the parts of the society in Western Balkans believes in that. If you don't have the real response, which we don't have at this stage from the European Union, then who will believe in the long-term future of the Western Balkans being a part of the European Union? It can be very significantly questionable story. And I think that this will be the main issue for the years to come, in which all of us who believe that the European Union is the real destiny of the whole region, we have to find the real answers. And we have to find the real answers also from the European Union, not only from the enthusiastic politicians, academicians from the region. The second part of today's agenda of this meeting, SDG. I have to say that SDG is not a real topic in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was simply formally accepted years ago, and then there was nothing done in reality to implement this agenda. Nothing. I think that there is no even single body, very bluntly I want to say that, dealing with SDGs in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is somewhere there, accepted in some formal meeting, but there was nothing in reality. Quite differently, we have development which is in reality completely different. For instance, there is a big deal now with based on the Chinese loan that there will be a big thermal power plant based on the coal, which has to be built in the years to come, and which has to be open in, let's say, 5 years. When majority of the countries, I think even Greece, will close basically all the thermal power plants based on the coal, and we will open the new ones. So this is completely not in accordance with the SDGs, just a single example. And I think that this is reality in majority of the countries in the Western Balkans, because somehow we have to understand that all the countries are isolated, left, especially during the COVID crisis, on their own, without the real support, especially from the European Union. And from that point of view, Everybody in these countries are thinking how we can survive. These big stories doesn't matter to us. Let's make something which will give us a chance to survive. So I think that we have to be very realistic with that. SDG is not the big story in the Western Balkans. I think in all the countries in the Western Balkans, I think that there is a need to make some sort of pressure in order to have increased credibility of those who are supporting that. There is a need for the more realistic approach and more concrete approach from the European Union. Unfortunately, because of all these problems with the COVID, with the vaccines, I am very pessimistic about change. Something will change in a short period of time. But in spite of everything, I think that we have to continue to make a pressure on the big players everywhere, locally and internationally, to continue with that. Because if we simply don't do that, I am very worried about the long-term development in the whole region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've made two very important points. Should we be part of Europe? Well, I think, I strongly agree with you that there is no other realistic way for the Western Balkans. Now, with regards, and I need to contain myself because I'm not a speaker, I'm just the moderator. With regards to what you said about the European Union failing to support the Western Balkans during this pandemic, I think the European Union and the US failed to support themselves. I mean, we have been not good cases. The Asian countries have been much better in containing the pandemic. Europe and the US have failed. And they are still not in the optimal pathway with regards to unjust deployment of the vaccine, with regards to collaboration and care and support for neighboring countries, low-income countries, developing countries. So with regards to the actual containment of the pandemic, yes, Europe has not been a success story. With regards to your other point that SDGs are not a relevant concept in reality because nobody has truly endorsed them or is discussing them or is integrating them into the political and policy-making process, I agree. And this is partly true, not just for the Western Balkans, but for the whole of Europe. As DSN Europe, in this current sustainable development report that we are producing in order to measure the implementation success of each country in Europe and neighboring countries with regards to the implementation of the SDGs, we are running a survey to ask exactly the question you ask. Are the SDGs a relevant framework? Are we working with them? Or is it just an agenda? Remarkably, the only global agenda at the moment, together with the human rights agenda. But is it just an agenda that we've signed and we forgot about them? Or is it really something that can be operationalized and help us in this sustainability transition? I hear what you're saying, and I know because I work in some of your countries as an international consultant and advisor, I know that the SDGs have not been endorsed. However, I also know as a scientist and a person that works for 25 years in the policy science interface, that if they've been endorsed, they would be instrumental in accelerating the transition because they can showcase pathways that are implementable, especially if these 17 SDGs are operationalized in the 6 transformation pathways that have been announced in 2019 that include health and well-being, education, decarbonization and sustainable industry, sustainable citizen communities, sustainable production of food and management of land, water, and oceans, and the digital revolution for sustainable development. I agree, they have not been used up to now, but I think if we can mobilize the political will for their endorsement, both within Europe and within the neighborhood of Europe, they could be instrumental in their acceleration of the sustainability agenda and the implementation of sustainability. And we need this acceleration because we don't have enough time. And I speak too much, so I will like to turn to our next speaker, and I will come back to you. President Petre, Roman, first of all, I would like to welcome Ian Fisher, Prime Minister of Czech Republic. We are very happy to have you with us. And I will now give the floor to Petre Roman from Romania to give us his first comments on the ability of Eastern Europe to recover in a way that is sustainable. Please, President, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Professor Kunduri. And I salute you all with my true friendly feelings, as usual. And, you know, the subject is still very important and interesting. In fact, it's about the Western Balkans, either about sustainable development or the prospect of every country belonging to the Western Balkans. Remember that 31 years ago, Western Balkans was about Yugoslavia and Albania. Yugoslavia fell apart in many parts, many countries. Wars erupted, terrible wars erupted on the in the space of the former Yugoslavia. And we see right now that the path of those different countries emerging from the former Yugoslavia were quite different. Why is that? It's should be a very interesting historical, economical, social analysis, cultural also, of course, analysis. Well, now, I agree with some of the questions you have raised, and I disagree with some others or some statements. I wouldn't say that the European Union failed in its efforts to manage the COVID pandemic. It's not true. First, because it's not the European Union who managed this pandemic. It was every country belonging to the European Union. The European Union took the very important step to of procuring the vaccines for all the European Union. And it's true that from this perspective, some not very nice, some not very good news came out. But nevertheless, we cannot say that it was a failure of the European Union. It's not true. I'm living in a country belonging to the European Union. We have had, because we are in fact countries with a real democracy, as in many countries, in my country too, we faced big protests, even mass protests against the restrictions. We have this freedom to express our opinions, and we have seen that even countries which seem to be at some point well prepared and doing well, like Germany, well, at some point the things evolved not as predicted. I'm not right now trying to, let's say, to establish a more scientific foundation for these issues. I'm simply still convinced, as I've been in the last, let's say, 15 years, that the prospect of the countries of the Western Balkans, some are already belonging to the European Union, but the prospects of belonging to the European Union is still, I think, the crucial point, because, for instance, the sustainable development strategy is already a reality in the European Union. We have a number of clearly established strategies about the sustainable development, and they are, I think, well thought, deeply thought, in order to have in order to cope with the climate change consequences, in order to promote the green economy, and to ensure, let's say, a new field of innovation. Right now, I think for the problem in the Western countries is political, is really political. Are the present leadership in every and each country in the Western Balkans prepare those the leadership, the present leadership, preparing for this new recovery era, post-COVID era, and post let's say classic economy? It's an opportunity. I mean, it could be an opportunity in that sense of innovation, technological, economic, social, and educational innovation. It's the right moment to establish strategies based, if possible, on a political consensus. For instance, Romania would never achieve its goal to be integrated in the European Union without establishing a political consensus. It was a large political consensus, almost, I would say, unanimous political attitude in order to integrate Romania into the European Union. I'm giving you just one figure. The Romanian people are not very happy with the development of Romania in the last 30 years after the Romanian Revolution. There are still many people thinking that under the communist regime, there were some industrial, especially industrial units, factories, enterprises, and so on, who performed much better than now. Or there is a consensus, and I understand perfectly well this consensus, about the fact that the quality of our education system, the schools, the universities, their quality is much lower. It's true, but nevertheless, I give you one figure. I tell you, from 2009 to 2019, during 20 years, the GDP per capita, for instance, in Germany rose to 130%. For France, 117% in those 20 years, and Romania, 608%. 608%. That would have been absolutely impossible without our relations, our process of integration, and the full integration of Romania into the European Union and the single market. It's a very clear one figure. Sometimes is telling much more than many other analysis or analytical approaches. So I still believe that the Western Balkans are facing a large disparity. The path, as I mentioned, the path of each country after the fall, after the Yugoslavia falling apart, was very different. Nevertheless, the prospect of integrating the European Union is something common. It's something which could be a common goal for the area. I don't think that, for instance, Serbia, which right now is playing quite strongly with Russia or sometimes with China, could have a solid path of development outside the European Union. I think there are many arguments. Montenegro, for instance, is close to becoming a member of the European Union, which is good news. Croatia, it's already. Slovenia, it's already. Albania should be. We have problems. The critical mass. I have to be very sincere, to be very candid. The critical mass which is needed in order to invite a country to start negotiations for the adhesion of that country to the European Union, it's always a critical mass of arguments and political support. Well, right now, we are quite far from such a critical mass. But if we, soon, because the European Union is moving towards a strategy for the European Union for in the next 2 years, we are trying right now in the next 2 years to establish a strategy of the new European Union, let's say, the new era of the European Union. Well, if it is so we are moving towards such a all-encompassing strategy, it is absolutely evident that we need to have the Western Balkans and Albania, including, of course, Albania, with us within the European Union. And then we embrace together the new economy. We embrace together, together we can do much more in terms of creativity and innovation. And these things could be explained by honest democratic leaders in all countries of the Western Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think anybody is disputing that the Western Balkans are a very important part of the enlargement of the European Union and European integration. Absolutely, it's definitely something that embraces the whole of the Western Balkan area. I think the issue here is how to create the political will and the support of the people together with the capacity to achieve a political and then a real integration in terms of the technological and financial and policy pathways that are needed to achieve a true integration. I also agree, and I think everybody in this panel agree, that the correct way to go is within the European Union, and at the same time with collaboration with the US, the UK, and China. We often create events with political representation between China, the US, and Europe, and find that the way we think about our recovery and about our sustainability roadmaps are quite the same. Of course, there are cultural, local, political differences, huge differences, but the common vision towards a sustainable, in terms of economy, society, and environment, future is there. China announced 2060 climate neutrality. Europe announced it in 2050. The US has announced a huge infrastructural plan which focuses quite exclusively, almost exclusively on climate change. So I think international cooperation is instrumental. Western Balkans definitely need to be part of Europe. It's the natural, I think, historical, cultural, and political integration. But let me turn now to Prime Minister Buyan Nishani, Prime Minister of a country who is already in an accession process, a country that also is based on agricultural production and hence quite vulnerable to extreme weather events caused by climate change. So I want to ask how high is the profile of this sustainability agenda in the country, and whether this sustainability agenda has been connected to discussions for the recovery from the COVID pandemic. Mr. Prime Minister, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Professor Andouros. And let me to correct something. Former president, not prime minister.
President, yes, you're. I'm really sorry. Too many
no. It's okay.
Too many presidents.
Just for a joke, because if the prime minister or former prime ministers here in Albania will hear you, will be very jealous with me.
Okay, sorry about that. Please,
anyway, thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure for me to be in such discussion. And always, when I've been in such web conference and meetings organized by Nizami Ganjavi International Center and the others, has been a real some experiences for me, and I'm glad to have possibility with many of people in this panel to meet, let's say, during my 5 years term in office, more than a dozen times, and made us real friends, and understanding each other better, and discussing direct things, and very openly mind, and understanding not the others, but even understanding much better our realities in our countries. So such meeting and discussion helped very much, and I'm honored and very pleased to be in this meeting. Talking about the SDG, or after that the cooperation in our region. In first part, I would like to say that I agree with President Ivanic to say that even in Albania, SDG, it's not so real topic, discussing among the people, discussing about the different actors here in the country, or it's not a real concern and commitment as much as important it is, in fact. I can say that in Albania, strategy exists, plans exist, even the will exists formally among the decision maker, among the politicians and other actors. By the way, in Albania, we are under the electoral campaigning. After 2 weeks, we will be in a new election, and hopefully, after 2 months, we will have a new government. But coming to the SDG, there is no any different, or there are no differences among the political forces. There is not any different between the center right or center left in Albania dealing with sustainable development. That's good in one side. But if we come on the other side of coin, in the reality, how this strategy is implementing, or how these plans are developing, frankly speaking, it's not such enthusiastic way to see that SDG or targets are in the top on priority agenda in the institutions of the country. Formally, I can say that in Albania, SDG targets mostly on the good health and then the well-being. It's targeting on clean energy. It's targeting on good jobs and economic growth. It's targeting to industry, innovation, and infrastructure as the most important fields, of course, to demonstrate developments, real developments. But I can say that one leverage in that field, it's the European integration process as a mechanism which always emphasize and push our commitments in such fields, such green agenda is. I strongly believe that even in that topic, the European integration is the best mechanism. It's a project delivered by the European Union permanent resident here in Albania with the motto, Europe is here. They are campaigning to inform the Albanian public about the EU commitment, especially in the key sectors which are dealing with SDGs, especially in infrastructure, in transport, environment, in agriculture, in tourism, and so on. Even more, that the European Union is planning 30 million euros starting from next year, focusing on such field. So again, if we will be responsible on addressing the question of sustainable development, mostly on the green field, in Albania we can have lots of things to do, especially on the improving of air pollution, on the waste treatment, river quality, on biodiversity. So we have real fields, such concrete fields, not as a identification, but even as a field which we can gain real results and real outcomes through implementing plans and strategy and investment money and other resources. Dealing, for example, with waste management, we do consider the integrated waste management as an important business. We have some companies here, and we have tried to improve some legislation. I've been lucky in my country to learn lots of things and to create my experiences, because being Minister of Interior, being Minister of Justice, and later being as a president, I gained lots of experience, and I of course learn lots by these experiences. So if we convert the responsibility to commitment and the commitment to responsibility again, we can profit lots of outcomes in this agenda. Another point and topic which we can demonstrate, not the importance of this topic, but even encouraging us for gaining results is the sustainable energy. The actual energy system in Albania is currently based completely at the hydro energy. And during last 10 years, it has been a kind of priority of the governments, different governments, to invest on the hydro energy through the offering concession to the private companies. And for good has been even domestic companies and some very big European and US companies which have been involved on about building 2,000 hydropower plants during the, let's say, last 10 years, and some others in the future. Talking about the SDG topics, in one side we have formally, theoretically, strategy and plans. In the middle, we have not so much commitment and dynamism, but on the other hand, I deeply believe that there is lots of space and room which we can fulfill responsibilities and gain outcomes and results. Coming to the point which I would like to emphasize is that in my strongly believe, the best way of achieving approaching the targets of sustainable developments in our region is the way of acting regionally and working regionally. Because first of all, our region in terms of economical development is a small market. We are aware about that. And being a small market, you have not such important interests from big companies. Another point which I would like to emphasize is that we have two main problems and concerns in our region. Talking, let's say, for Albania, but even a little bit broader. One is domestic problem and concern, and another is regional one. Coming to the domestic one, if I can refer to Albanian experiences, but even to the others, I may say, is that we still have a big problem with corruption and the standard of rule of law. Both of them, corruption and lack of rule of law or weak of rule of law, make us weaker in front of different challenges, especially on the sustainable development. Talking about the European integration process, I strongly believe that this is the best mechanism, cultivating, first of all, the culture, the way of building institutions, which not every time is efficient, of course. But generally speaking, absolutely in this process, because I do consider the integration as a process, not just as a political decision of a round table of EU member states leadership. But it's a process when the main responsibility belongs to us. And the best leverage to be well-oriented in this process is democracy. Democracy is the most difficult one, but on the other hand is the best one. circulation of the political elite, putting the culture of entire corruption, putting as a culture the building of strong institutions, and respecting, let's say, the processes which circulate the people from the power. It's the healthy feeding of the democracy and the entire society mentality. So because of that, I do see this domestic problem as full responsibilities of our societies. And when we come to the regional concern, besides what happened, as the Prime Minister Peter Roman mentioned, an extremely enormous improvement has happened during last decade after the wars that happened in our region. Besides that, still we face lack of trust. We still face lack of good understanding. But if we focus our positive energy to the restoring the good understanding, restoring or strengthening, better to say, strengthening the trust among us. I do believe that the new generation will be educated and growing up healthy in terms of way of thinking.
Mr. Yes, please go on.
Yeah, just finishing. To come to the sustainable energy, sustainable development, dealing with a green agenda. Our region is absolutely a region which cannot produce or develop big industry for a number of reasons. But our region is absolutely a great resource for tourism. Coming to the tourism, in my view, or referring the case of Albania, besides the resources that we have, but we are aware that we cannot compete, for example, Greece in tourism, which has a huge potential and very long experiences on that. But we can compete all the countries beyond our region with green tourism, for example, because there is no so often to find a place when the mountain, the river, and the sea can cross each other within a surface 10,000 kilometers squares. So often. So if we prioritize some developments focused on the most efficient resources and outcomes which can be developed, so we can be absolutely resilient, and we can be successful on that. We're coming to the last thing that I want to mention, to the common market of energy, especially on the green energy, on sustainable energy. I mentioned a little bit earlier about the hydropower plants which have been constructed or still are under constructing in Albania. But in Albania, just finished the extremely important investment, which also include Greece, Italy, and some other countries like the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, which is part of Southern Gas Corridor, transporting natural gas to Europe from the Shah Deniz field in Azerbaijan. If we can deliver or frameworking this network in our region and working with a common strategy on the sustainable energy, I do believe that it's another extremely important field which we fulfill our commitments dealing with SDG, fulfilling our responsibility for sustainable development, and fulfilling our duty with normal, friendly, and secure environment, not just for development, but for living together in a better way. So I believe on such strategies, but I am so eager to see more dynamism and concrete commitments on that field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am amazed by your clarity and your sincerity. I mean, you've been sincere in identifying the institutional challenges connected with corruption in your country. This is something that it's also identified in the indexes that we construct as SDSN with regards to the achievement of different goals. At the same time, you have identified the Albanians' leadership with regards to climate mitigation. Albania is one of the very few countries in the region, not Western Balkan, in the European region that has achieved SDG 30 with regards to climate action, mainly because of the investments in the hydro energy production. And that is something that I always point when we have discussion in Greece, but also the Southern Europe, showcasing how a country can identify its potential with regards to renewable resources and invest on it in order to achieve both production efficiency and at the same time safeguarding environmental resilience, or at least safeguarding the quality of the environment with regards to the footprint that it can create when producing energy. And the third point I want to mention that was, I absolutely agree with you, and it is crucial. Albania has a huge potential in biotourism. The way you describe it is perfect, is the way that the country should always describe it in international fora. It has this unique provision of sea, mountain, and rivers, and it's something, again, a comparative advantage that it can build on. I've been following the country very closely, and it shows remarkable achievements, while at the same time it has huge challenges, especially with regards to vulnerability to climate change and floods and the effects of these floods in agriculture. But we will come back to that. Thank you very much. I will now like to turn to Prime Minister Jan Fischer from Czech Republic to give us his own view on the current situation in his country and the region, and let us know whether he thinks the country has the capacity, but also the interest, the political and public will to embark on this SDG-related sustainability transition, or whether the discussion in the country is not related to the SDGs, but uses some other jargon that, in essence, it's related to the SDGs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for the floor. Thanks, Nizami Ganjavi, International Center, for inviting me to this exciting debate with a lot of very well-known faces. So many greetings to you, dear friends and colleagues, and I will be very happy to see you face to face rather than through this very efficient vehicle, but just it is technology. It's not face-to-face interaction. But let's say be grateful for this. The second thing is that to speak at the end of the, could be said, a series of so, let's say, relevant and prestigious speaker, it's a little bit ungrateful, but I do my best to identify where I agree, where I potentially disagree. So I would like to start with commenting on the fact that in the, let's say, a range of 1 decade, the globe and world is facing 2 crises, very deep and very tough global economic crisis with the drop of the macroeconomic figures. And this drop of macroeconomic figures, by the way, is just, I would say, this just one and single similarity between the crisis in 2009 and until 2011 and the current crisis. The causes are very different. The featuring of 2 crises is very different. And the response of the politicians and the response of the fiscal, on the side of the fiscal and macroeconomic policies are very, very different. Just the macroeconomic figures could seem to be similar, and that's it. That's it. And this is the relevant thing, because in this current crisis, not speaking about the victims of the COVID-19, which is the, could be said that it's a global tragedy. On the other hand, this crisis brings a lot of challenges, a lot of, let's say, I would say even hopes. And the question is how to recover. Now we are talking about, firstly, about the story, about the lessons learned, and about the recovery and plans for recovery on national level, domestic level, on international, European, and even global level. And what's the role of the international institutions in this process? What's the role of the national governments? And what's the expectation, by the way, of the population and the people from their leaders? And this trust in the ability of the and potential of the current leaders, current elites, current governments, they were very toughly tested, and they were getting at stake anyway. I see it in my country, could be said, the drop of the trust in the role of the state, how the state can care for its people, for its inhabitants, for the general public. The same is targeted to the European Union. So this is could be said, the pillars of the democracy, pillars of the democratically built up institutions is a little bit at stake. And what I am saying consistently and regularly, if I am questioned, what will be how will the economic recovery actually look? My response is that I am not so much afraid about the economic recovery than to the recovery of the society, because the societies were atomized. The very brutal but unavoidable lockdowns were something which has atomized the society. It led to the distortion of the normally performing interactions between people, groups, institutions. So this is something which is very, very warning. A lot of children without a normally performing education process. There were a lot of children, students based on or referred to the distance learning or distance teaching. thanks God that we have these vehicles available and we can use it. I cannot imagine what we should have done 20, 25 years before, by the way. So on the other hand, this crisis clearly shows the role of the science, globally organized science. It's clearly visible on the process, on the development, testing and financing of the production, research and production of vaccines. That's positive. The science, it's, let's say, getting closer to normal, I would say, normal people. So this is the science is just, in this time, science is nothing which is too far away, but it is something which is very close and supporting, fighting for lives and for the health of the broad mass of people. As concerns the economy itself, I think that the impact of the crisis, current economic crisis, was unlikely in the 2009 and 2010. The problem is that the impacts of the crisis are very differentiated. There are some areas economy that were hit very badly currently, but there are some areas, industry or e-shops and I don't know what, which were, let's say, have been even boosting, so very differentiated. The absolutely different compared with the former crisis is the response of the fiscal policy. At that time, it was the series of the austerity measures, let's say, squeezing of the expenditures, state expenditures of the state budget. I know what I'm talking about because at the time I played the role of the Prime Minister and even of the President of the European Union at that time. And it was absolutely different. Now we are, let's say, used to pump money into the economy, which is unavoidable, no question about that. But the mental problem of the policymakers is, and the prime ministers and mainly ministers of the finance, that they are getting too used to it anyway. So more and more money, and that's free of charge anyway. That's not free of charge. That have to be paid off. Until the last dollar, last euro, last, I don't know, any national currency. And I'm just looking around and I see the leaders, I see the politicians, I see the policymakers, that they are very fragile, very fragile. That's no problem to pump still 100 million there, 100 million to the other area, and so on and so forth. No feeling of, let's say for some austerity measures on the other side. Everything has to be compensated. So the featuring of the fiscal policy is one of the, let's say, disastrous things, and the approach and the attitude from the side of the policymakers towards the featuring and setting up of the fiscal policy and balancing between fiscal policy and the macroeconomic reality is one of the most important topics on the national and on the, let's say, international level as well. If I go a little bit farther on what to do, and where we are in Europe, in the world. Of course, that this crisis and not only economic crisis. This global crisis actually is reshuffling the political picture, geopolitical picture all over the world anyway. The actors playing the role of the dominating actors in the global politics and global economy, they are watching anyway how to change the role, how to continue their role, how to improve their, let's say, position, how to improve their impact. That's clearly visible on what China is doing, what Russia is doing, and others. What is positive that the new administrative in the White House is coming to the ruling position, and I think that the could be a drive of Biden in the presidency will mean the improving of the distorted relationships between Europe and the US. That's clear, and that's by the way, very positive. Europe could be. I am not so skeptic that the, let's say, response of Europe was so dramatically weak as it was presented by Madame Professor. But on the other hand, it's clear that Europe is not in good shape. It's not in good shape. I'm openly saying that Europe needs a completely new debate, new wave of debate about about itself. It's not some kind of the technocratic way or technocratic style debate. It's the debate, and it was mentioned, by the way, by several speakers before me. That's the substantial debate about values, what to do after Brexit, what to do in the time of recovery, how to deal with the global issues, energy, sustainability, green energy, green plants, decarbonization anyway. And everything cannot be forgotten, by the way. Anything cannot be forgotten. So this is the role of the European Union, of European leaders, by the way, European elites. And I think that people should play the role. They could be said because proper watchdogs, what elites are doing anyway. In some countries, and I see it in my country, the position of the elites, the voted, the elected leaders is okay. Let us be, and let us doing what we know as the best. And you voted us, you elected us, so keep calm and just look what we are doing, and no protests, no let's say no commenting on, no criticism. I think that's bad, and this is also currently I see the very tough positions of some European leaders towards non-governmental organization, towards NGOs. That's the typical feature anyway of this let's say attitude. That's very dangerous anyway. It's threatening the democracy. Actually, it's threatening the democracy. So, and it's always, I'm talking about Europe, not about some developing world or something like that. And now, yeah, I am coming. So that's the European Europe needs this kind of debate, and as a part of debate is and what is on the table, and it hasn't disappeared from the table. It's the agenda of enlargement. How to proceed further on. Sometimes it's suppressed by, okay, that's later on we have some other cares and other concerns anyway. We have other concerns, that's great. But we shouldn't forget that there are some topics or points in the agenda which cannot be forgotten anyway. So if I speak in the terms of the Western Balkan accession anyway, I cannot say anyway whether it should be tomorrow and one day after tomorrow and in one decade anyway. I think that it doesn't matter. And the situation in Western Balkan countries is very different, and you know it, let's say, better than me, of course. But important is that the signal sent from Brussels and from the capitals is, we don't forget you, we don't forget this agenda. We know about it. We need to debate it. We need to think it over how to manage it anyway. And I'm afraid that I'm afraid too that this point is a little bit fading, a little bit disappearing from the agenda, and that's actually worrying, and that's warning. That's actually warning. It's actually warning. Europe cannot be a closed shop. This continent cannot afford. Towards Western Balkan, we have to shape the policy towards the US and, let's say, towards Euro-Atlantic relation, towards Russia, towards China, and not to play the role of we have our concerns and so on. So please, 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 that's my plea for Brussels and for European leaders, European elites. Please don't expose the points from the essentially European agenda, but to discuss it anyway. So, and that's not necessary to be under pressure that everything, it's also connected of you can speak about the enlargement. Okay, but it's not priority today. But it's absolutely irrelevant and absolutely, let me use this wording, it's stupid and it's crazy anyway. It's not a relevant response to this issue. It has to remain on the agenda. This way on anyway. It's the part of the debate on the values, by the way. It's not external thing. One thing I would like to, SDG, by the way, this is very interesting what I have had here. And I think that the prevailing opinion from your side, it's rather skeptical. That's not something which is not in the focus, as a priority, that's the issue of the or agenda of the lower prioritization. I share this opinion, by the way. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. But on the other hand, I'm not skeptical about sustainability itself. This is a very important thing anyway, and shouldn't be forgotten. But it's not trivial. And it seems to me in the current time that I see that the sustainability debate on sustainability is reduced on just one thing, and this is environment. And we shouldn't forget that the sustainability is still remaining as a triangle: economy, social efforts, social policy, social situation, and the environmental issues or environmental agenda. So that's what my position is, to, let's say, stay with this marvelous triangle: economy, three corners. And I'm not saying what is more important. It's still in balance. So I think that I am not skeptical. I think that the concept of the liberal democracy on which the European Union is, let's say, and the civilization is, let's say, based, it's threatened, but not dead. That's the challenge for the political elites. That's the think of the debate on the values, and I actually believe that the role of the European Union, European institutions, is not European free market. I wouldn't like to forget it. It was mentioned several times. That's the challenge. That's still opportunity, which hasn't been, let's say, exploited as we would like to see, by the way. And what I'm saying, no closed shop, European Union enlargement to have on the table, and the European Union as not the, let's say, European, it is not a union of the institutions, not some institutional framework, nothing technocratical, nothing in hands of elites, but this is something which is very alive, and that's the, let's say, the challenge and the opportunity for 500 million of people living there. That's what I would like to end up, and sorry that I was so long. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your amazing contribution. I will pick up on the focus on the need to focus on the enlargement and the need to engage all the people in this enlargement, because it is cultural, it is economic, it's social, it's environmental. I would also like to mention two amazing points that you made, amazing points, and not many are discussing about that, and it is crucial. The difference between the way we are handling this crisis with the pandemic and the financial crisis of 2008 to 2007, 2008. Back then, everybody thought that the solution is austerity. Now, everybody refers to these recovery packages and this enlarged fiscal space that allows to design the transformational change and finance the transformational investments that we want to make in order to recover back better. However, as you rightly said, Prime Minister, what is important for us to remember is that this is national debt that will be paid by the future generations. So there is an issue of national debt. First of all, the fact that it will be paid by national debt creates a moral responsibility to build back in a way that will allow the next generations that will pay for this national debt to live with prosperity, with economic, social, and environmental resilience and sustainability. But in addition to this, we need to think first whether all countries can have this fiscal space. They don't. And also, most importantly, whether this recovery spending, this fiscal stimulus can create inflationary pressures. My studies, my research group studies on this issue, on inflationary pressures, shows that there are increased risks from these expansionary policies. The fundamentals of the economic development are changing, and inflationary pressures are a serious risk that may lie ahead, and we need to be very, very, very cautious. And I am thankful for you that you are putting this on the agenda. I am part of the Lancet Commission on COVID-19. I try to put this thing in the agenda, especially with the Financial Recovery Task Force. And at the moment, I understand why there is reluctance to do so, because we need to respond fast in order to protect the people and the economy, but there is a true and an imminent danger from inflationary pressures. And I also appreciate very much the fact that in your amazing speech, you referred to the role for research and education and innovation, which is something that I'm going to return back in the closing statements that I will ask from you. But before that, I would like to ask Prime Minister Zlatko Lagundzija this is my best ability of pronunciation, to make your first remarks with regards to how you see our region in terms of being able to recover back better from this pandemic. Mr. Prime Minister, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Phoebe. I mean, like every one of you, I went through this concept note that we got some days ago that Roshan and you prepared very precisely and very, I mean, to the point. I did a lot of homework. I went through 11 questions that you were expecting us to do. So I read even some of the reports, especially the ones that you were mentioning in here, to get prepared. But at the same time, of course, I'm not going to say what I was thinking to say, because I mean, as someone who really accepts the philosophy of Nizami Ganjavi about dialogue, tolerance, learning, and understanding, I'm going to change my intervention slightly from what I thought in the beginning, having in mind what I learned from what I heard in here and what I more or better understood so far, and some questions, maybe, and some hints that were underlying your discussions and your thoughts, are driving me in a certain direction that I would like to share with you on the end. Phoebe, I mean, the report that you gave us as one of the reference, the one that you were strongly participating in it as someone who is really respected among all of us as an academic intellectual who is so much devoted together with our friend Jeffrey Sachs in the Sustained Development Solution Network. And I mean, your work, especially in this SDSN of Greece, and also in Sustained Development Solutions Network as a global thing. And your reference to this European Sustained Development Report that was just launched 3-4 months ago, it gave us a lot of food for thoughts that are corresponding to what we heard in here. I want just to say a few words. Out of 6 of us, plus you, Phoebe, 3 of us are coming from Western Balkan, from, let's say, the waiting room for the Grand Ball, which is European Union. And Petre and Jan are actually already there in a big ballroom, and they do dance and they enjoy everything. We are still preparing ourselves. So I think that the topic that we're talking about, and that's why NGIC it has a Western Balkan as one of our major topics and major issues in concept of, as Jan likes to say, geopolitical future of Euro-Atlantic structures and Euro-Atlantic sphere. Western Balkan is not just, it's not about economy, it's not about number of people, because it's just on a level of, Jan, forgive me for using your area of expertise, we are not even statistical error. I mean, in all those numbers. But we are much more about the values that Europe is about. That's exactly what Jan was very eloquently underlined again, especially saying that there is a major difference in between when we talk about this. We have to talk more about the changes and challenges for societies, not for economy. Economy is a tool. Society is supposed to be our goal. And we have to go in that direction and see how we can. I think personally, when you were saying us, I mean, how much our country's strategies are corresponding with very, very good points from that European Sustained Development Report. We have a problem that 4 of us who are coming from Bosnia, Montenegro, and Albania, we cannot refer to how far we are from, because we are not part of the report. Because report has 31 countries, 27 European countries, and as it is said as a let's say partners countries. Partners countries are Norway, Iceland, Sweden, and Liechtenstein, or whoever, but not us. We are not level. So I think that what we should do is we should see how we can become in near future treated by a report like this. The way to do this is actually what you are good at, and our friends from Jeffrey Sachs and on. We have to see how we can create awareness in Western Balkan, much bigger awareness of the things that we are talking about. We have to create more awareness. We have to create sense of urgency. We have to see how we can put together alliance of like-minded entities from the region, from the Western Balkan, and from Balkan, which is not Western, which is happy Balkan, from Greece to Romania, and then to Central Europe, like Jan is coming from, and all over to the family of European nations. So how to create it? I think the Sustained Development Solution Network is one of the excellent tools and mechanisms that we should use much more in Western Balkan. That's the reason you're familiar with it, I'm sure. What we are doing as one of NGIC initiatives, thanks to the things that we saw in Global Baku Forum when we were participating in Black Sea SDSN activities, we came to the idea to try to make a Western Balkan SDSN. At the same time, I think it's a good idea that in some countries, for example, Mladen and myself, we are trying to see how we can do something in Bosnia like that time. Igor is with us on board, and with Professor Cvetkovic, former Prime Minister of Serbia, that we try to establish Western Balkan SDSN network. And we are in very far advance of speaking. We had the blessing from Jeffrey a year ago on our economic forum that he will be participating in shortly in 15 days with Jan and Igor and myself, which will be talking about similar issues in here. But I think one of the things that we should do is we should see how we can create awareness and use the tools that we have already, like SDSN network, to maybe tackle the one in my country, in Albania, in Montenegro, and then to do networks of Western Balkan, to see how we can proceed in that area. I'm sure that you will be on board with us. And of course, that's one of the things. Second thing, what I want to say a few words about is that I think it is very important to underline, as Peter was talking about what actually European Union meant to the countries of the former Eastern Europe. In this report, we can see that when it comes to the, let's say, changing of gap in the last 10 years that is shrinking in between developed EU countries and not so developed EU countries. This is positive thing because you can see that SDGs are shrinking the gap in between different level of the countries. We also see that when it comes to let's say, parameter that is talking about not being left behind, which is one of the key issues, especially in the social context and the context that you underline very often, Phoebe. That's also seen that countries in let's say smaller developed, less developed countries in European Union are shrinking that gap in leaving no one behind, which means that this is really good thing. And something which should be for us kind of, let's say, awakening is that when you see from your reports, when you see the correlation between changes of GDP as a result of COVID, and when you see the rate of deaths per 100,000 people, you don't see that actually that economy, flourishing economy and degrading economy is, let's say, a road to success or to failure. You see that basically speaking, some people were saying that, like developed countries will go through easily with it. They won't lag behind with economy. We see that Bosnia, where Mladen and I are coming, we are in the top 10 in the world in number of deaths per 100,000 people. But we are together with Czech Republic and Belgium. And we are definitely not the same class of economic development. So there is much more things to see in this big picture. So I think that it is very important that we also, as Jan was mentioning a few times, underlying from different perspectives, this is not about the date when we are going to become EU member, us from Western Balkan. It's about process, it's about reforms that we have to go through. But I want to say that European Union becoming European Union of 27 plus 6 of us in some near future. For us, it's like driving a bicycle. We have to keep rolling, keep driving the bicycle, otherwise we'll just fall down and the goal will never come. But at the same time, I think that European Union is also driving the bicycle. You are also on a bicycle. You also have to keep driving and keep this project of enlargement of European Union based on not territories and countries, but the values. And on the end, the territories will be a part of it. But we have to stick to the values that European Union is about. And that's the reason why SDGs are the best diet we have available to get trimmed and in line to be joining that ball where some of you are. So SDGs are something that we have to, in that context, I really appeal to all of us to keep working on creating awareness, because as former people who were used to sit in the government, prime ministers, presidents, decision makers, whoever, we all know from our own experience, when you're on the top, when you're in executive power, you most of the time you spend trying to fulfill your programs, your goals and your objectives, but not less time you basically speaking spend by responding to the pressure you from real life, pressure from different stakeholders and pressure from the problems. So we have to be, as alliance of like-minded people and entities, putting a pressure on decision makers and helping them to actually drive in the right direction like we would like them to be, if we would probably doing with the same knowledge that we have today if we were in that position that time, long time ago, or whenever ago. So my point is very simple, final point. We have to see how we can keep creating the community and alliance of like-minded people and entities along the topic that we have in here. And SDSN, creation of sustainable development social network in certain countries and certain regions is, I think, very concrete move and activity that we can be part of and trying to do something in order to create awareness and put the people who are in the shoes that we used to be more responding to the things that we are talking about today.
Yeah,
so that will be how.
Yeah, that's what we need. Zlatko, if I may, this is exactly what we need. And this is why in SDSN Europe that I co-chair now, I argue that it is not just the 27+1 countries. It's about the neighboring countries, the accessing countries. It's about the Balkans, definitely. And this year, first of all, let me tell you that we do the analysis with regards to SDGs for all the countries in the Balkans, irrespective of whether they are in Europe or in a European member state or not. And this year, we're gonna do the analysis for the recovery of different countries, cross-compare recovery pathways and strategies, and we are gonna include in this analysis Balkan countries as well. So I fully support the idea of creating an SDG for the Balkans or the Western Balkans. We want to work with you. We feel that you are part of SDSN Europe. We can do many things to increase the understanding and knowledge about the SDGs and help design the pathways that will allow the society, together with the economy, to continue riding the bike. You are absolutely right that member states have to bike all the time, especially the southern member states that have a gap compared to the, let's say, northern member states and central member states. And together, in collaboration, a lot can be achieved because we can learn from each other and learn how we can invest on our comparative advantages and create prosperity and welfare that can be shared among all. What is crucial, I think, is that this awareness campaign is also integrated with three other elements: technology transfer, capacity for sustainable financing, because now the European Union institutions and other global multilateral institutions are going to have sustainability commitments for continuing the countries. So we need to get awareness with regards to what is the EU taxonomy, what does sustainable finance means, what makes a sustainable investment. And then education, research, and innovation. How we use the results of education, research, and innovation in order to enhance the ability of the society and the economy to embark, to become part of the sustainability transition, so that we leave no one behind. I want to close our conversation by giving each one of you 3 to 5 minutes to give your concluding remarks with regards to what do you think could be the entry point of an SDSN network. What do you think will be the first product of SDSN that can help your country mobilize the dialogue on the science policy interface towards an SDG-based recovery? What do you need? Do you need more awareness with regards to the state of SDG implementation in the country? More awareness with regards to possible technological pathways? What is the crucial missing link? I know there are many, but what is the most important, crucial missing link in order to enable as an SDG political discussion, but also enable a science policy interface discussion on the SDGs in your country? So I will start with using the same rotation that I did before in our introduction. So I will ask Prime Minister Igor Luksky to give us his final remarks, concluding remarks. Thank you.
But thank you so much. Thank you all for excellent, really fantastic insights and discussions. I think it is all very inspiring. And as Zlatko has said in his remarks, obviously during the discussion and during the panel, we all tend to learn and get some additional insight or some ideas. And I think the way you're approaching it right now is really fantastic follow-up in terms of trying to design an action point. And I think we need action points because we need mobilization in this field. What would be, if we are to kind of design an action point, what would be something that we should do? I think, and I fully agree with what Zlatko mentioned, and also you, Phoebe. It is about understanding where we are. I think, and we all agree, SDG has been accepted agenda, and in a way, it came to all of us as a top-down approach. General Assembly of the UN agreed, we passed it. I think both Zlatko and myself, I don't know about the rest, but we were there, I think, in 2015, taking part in that General Assembly meeting. And it was a great event. But I think we need to start to mainstream sort of this agenda. And the Western Balkan countries need to start from somewhere. We all do have our strategies. Now there is green agenda for Western Balkans and so on, but I think we all need some new effort. And the fact that COVID-19 has assumed a lot of attention and a lot of resources has left us with a relatively high or very high public debt burden, with knowing that we've got infrastructure gap. We still have relatively low quality of public administration, low level of rule of law in our countries, still much to do to improve business environment, and so on and so on. If we are to engage in all those activities, if we are to pursue the road of the green recovery, to decarbonize and so on, if we see that as something which should bring about crucial long-term recovery, we still need to start from somewhere. And my experience tells me that in countries like Western Balkan countries, it is always nice to get compared to someone else or to get compared to some useful average. For example, we do compare with EU in terms of the average purchase power. And right now in our countries, it is somewhere between 35 or 45 or 50% of what is the average purchase power of the EU. So we know there is a big gap. So, okay, now we start to think what policies we need to pursue to improve. I also, from my experience, believe that reports like Doing Business are very important. It is World Bank's Doing Business. Sometimes we tend to compete with each other to improve the business environment practices, but it's very nice and very helpful to have a toolkit in a way. Producing something like SDG report for the countries in the Western Balkans to know where we are, to understand the gap between us and better performing countries is, I think, the first important gap assessment analysis we need, because based on that we may derive policies. As you say, it might be technological transfer, it might be different other policies, it might be whatever. But we need to start for something. We need to understand where we are, and then it's much easier to brainstorm and figure out what is it we should do. Obviously, as days go by, we tend to learn from a lot of innovation that has been going on in the world, and blending it with already existing EU accession support, with new mechanisms, which are green bonds or sustainability bonds, or new carbon accounting, UN Compact, what corporations are pursuing. There are plenty of innovation in this field. We are all sort of falling in love with all of that, but in order to transfer the best possible experience into our countries, I think we need to start from somewhere, and we need to understand where we are right now. So I would suggest that should be the first step we do, or the major action, first major action point. Let's do the gap assessment. Let's understand where, from the SDG point of view, Western Balkan countries are, in order to begin with transferring the best possible experience. That's how I see it. Thank you so much.
Amazing. I totally agree with that, and I can commit to trying to mobilize that and participate in the scientific undertaking of that. Let me move to Mladen Ivanic to give us his remarks, his concluding remarks and views on the discussion.
I agree with Igor, and I really believe that, especially during these difficult times, when the public is faced with a lot of challenges, how to survive the COVID, when the society is faced with the lack of the healthcare in almost all countries, where the public is faced with the real fight for the survivals. Speak about the SDG looks a little bit irrelevant from that point of view, and I personally disagree with that. I really believe that all these goals are extremely important, especially from the long-term point of view. For the long-term future of this society, SDG is something which is really essential. But somehow we have to recover the energy about that in the whole public, among the academicians, politicians, general public. To speak now about the SDG in these circumstances, it looks like you are a little bit coming, that you are somewhere from some other world, and that you are not faced with the real daily life problems. And I think that this is especially a problem in not really developed countries, Western Balkan countries, where the people are faced with so many daily issues, so that this is something which looks so artificial for the ordinary citizens, that somehow we have to send the message it matters. And that message that it matters is extremely important and cannot be done just by the few individuals coming from the universities. It has to be the common effort. And as I said, in Bosnia, there was a huge discussion. Shall we open a new thermal power? Shall we start to build a new thermal power plant based on the coal? During the times when in the rest of the Europe, there are decisions to close. In Bosnia, it looks, what do you want to lose the jobs? And why? Because of something which looks so artificial. I think that not only in the Western Balkan countries, but even in the rest of the Europe, we have put the new energy in this story about the SDG. I think that this is something which is needed. Hope that once the COVID crisis will be closed, there will be a chance to organize a new big meetings, a new big events about that. And I think that with that, we can have a new energy, and then in long term that we can generally succeed.
Exactly. We need to explain to people why a non-fossil fuel energy production can create jobs, can help with the health of people, the health of the environment, and can create positive growth multipliers. We need to explain to people with energy and numbers, like you said, and I totally agree. And I want to, the whole of our team as SDSN Europe, this concerns more than 400 institutional members, would be delighted to offer the scientific basis for all these arguments. Thank you very much. So can I ask Prime Minister Petre Roman to give us his concluding remarks?
Yes, thank you, dear Phoebe. Well, many people, many ordinary people ask sometimes this question, what you're talking about, what's sustainable development? The meaning of sustainable development and the content of it are constantly evolving and fortunately constantly enriched. Just one example. Only 10 years ago, the renewables, wind and solar, were not, let's say, as they put it, economically sound. Due to a fantastic scientific creativity and technological innovation, today nobody, in the market, from the pure point of profitability, nobody is denying that this energy is not only available, not only clean, it's also economically feasible. Okay. Phoebe said we have to explain, we need to explain. We are not all professors. I am professors. And maybe the first step is somehow to make the people wanting to understand. The first step in politics is the people to want to understand, to want to listen to you. We are not yet there. The most difficult thing in politics, my experience, not only my personal and my cultural experience, is to gather consensus, political consensus. It's something extremely difficult. But it seems that step by step, not quickly enough, but step by steps, we are capable of gathering a political consensus towards the sustainable development. And of course, the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda is, theoretically speaking, a good document. Now, concretely, in practical terms, we are not yet there. I think that the sustainable development is becoming, I hope, is becoming a story, a narrative. We need more and more to an emotional narrative about our common destiny, common future, common problems. And the pandemic is helping us to build such a emotional narrative, which of course is based rationally, but you need to touch the people soul, values. Values are coming, human values, moral values, and of course economic values together. So in the Western Balkans right now, and I insist on that because I know how I had to do that in my country, to build a positive narrative about what it is to integrate the European Union, not just in general terms, in very specific practical terms. Then to show that the narrative of the sustainable development is closely interlinked, interdependent with the integration within the European Union. Narratives are the most efficient and the most modern, also being very ancient, way of bringing people together. So instead of explaining technically or explaining as teachers, as professors, let's tell them what we feel rationally and emotionally about this future of humanity.
I agree. It takes a politician to communicate the narrative. And it is amazing when you have the combination of the scientific robustness and the political talent to create the narrative based on a solid scientific basis. And that's why it's so important what Jeff Sachs is doing in this SDSN network, because he's working on this science policy interface. And it takes both scientists and politicians. Sometimes we are very lucky that this comes in one, like in your case, but usually...
I'm interrupting to add one word, yeah. Networking. Yeah. Networking. You cannot pass the message, you cannot pass the narrative without networking.
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah. It's absolutely true. So it needs a lot of work on all fronts. It is an interdisciplinary, inter-area, inter-country, transboundary effort. But I really believe that if we have a firm understanding of what is going on, those that are creating and communicating the narrative, if those have a firm understanding of the scientific basis, their job becomes much easier. And the robustness of the message is important in order to have the narrative achieving impact. So yes, I totally agree with you, and I have to continue because I am carried away by this conversation, and we are 15 minutes late. But I would like to ask the President of Albania, Bujar Nishani, to give us his concluding remarks.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Very kind introduction, and absolutely so important discussions. Great experience. Thank you. I would like just to remain again on framework of our region, and because I do not exclude all of you that are coming from EU member countries, because we do consider together in the same framework, in the same culture and mentality. the pandemic and the COVID-19 taught us that we are not prepared as much as we are thinking. Doesn't matter we are a rich country, developing country, or poor country. Because it's not a matter of vaccine. Because let's think a little bit, just a moment. If we can get 100% of the population the vaccine, and by end of the season of vaccination, we can face with mutation of the virus. So always we remain threatened by something that we are not prepared to face it successfully. So on that point of view, I think that nowadays is more than ever before to understand and to present to ourselves and our societies how much important is sustainable development and preparing for being sustainable in all kinds of fields, especially on such fields that are threatening us. And all threats are dealing with our environment. If we are ignoring the environment, we are far away for being prepared in maximum possibilities and mechanisms to react properly. Because COVID taught us that we cannot face successfully right way everything that is facing unexpected way toward us. Secondly, focusing on our region, I do believe that if we respect two principles, among the others, of course, first about the harmonization of resources, because besides being a small market, not a big surface, geographically terms, our region has absolutely each country its specific resources. And if we start thinking and working together through harmonization of resources, and those harmonization of resources addressing to a consensus of common projects, we can be absolutely much more prepared and attractive even towards the European Union public opinion or decision makers within the European Union to see broadly things on our sustainable development, not just as a region, not just as a continent, but globally. Because absolutely we saw last year and months that challenges are global challenges, are not the challenge which remain within a country, within a region, or within a continent, but easy are spreading around the world. So through the harmonization of our resources and through the consensus on common projects, I think that we can be more efficient on our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Of course, harmonization, collaboration, and of course, focus on resilience, because indeed the pandemic has shown how vulnerable we are and how the vulnerability of even the smallest country on earth becomes the vulnerability of the globe. And it is so important to be able to build on our resilience. We need a new concept of resilience now, because as we've seen, this pandemic can become endemic, can be with us. The consequences and the dangers and the risk can be with us for quite some time. And this is something that we work on within the Lancet Commission for COVID-19. I call it the Task Force on Green Recovery, and this is a big issue that we are working on, how we need to think of our global resilience. I will now move to Prime Minister Ian Fisher to give his concluding remarks. Please, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. I see that our time is a little bit squeezed or limited, so I try to be brief and concentrated. We were talking about a lot of things anyway. Our agenda of this meeting was extraordinary broad, which is pretty good anyway. I think what we need currently to speak about the, let's say, properly targeted recovery planning and recovery plans, it's necessary to have a good analysis or analysis where we are, what's the situation surrounding us, what this awful crisis brought, and what we lost, what we gained anyway, where are the opportunities, what are the challenges, and how to pave the road to the future, and what are the consequences of the crisis for politics, for even geopolitics, for global economy, for relationships between the nations, for relationships between the establishments and the public, the general public. What's the perception of the population of this crisis? What happened with the trust in the elites, trust in political establishments, in policy making, and then what we need based on this, let's say, good analysis, it's to not to have only the transparent and understandable goals, but to have the transparent ways how to achieve them. So some kind of, let's say, what we need is not only the recovery of economy, recovery of the trust in state, in politics, and what should be, let's say, emphasized and we should concentrate on the role of the science and technologies for improving and enabling and let's say enhancing the communication. We have to involve the education and educational agenda to the thinking about recovery. And what is very important is to properly reflect and let's say reflect the role of international organizations. I have not only the UN and European Union and so on, but also international financial institutions, and how to reflect there, or what we expect from them. Also, and it was mentioned, it was pretty good, the role of business, enterprises, top managers on one hand, NGOs on the other hand, anyway. And what we haven't spoken so far, and that's the role of media. They are extremely important anyway, if we want or don't want, if we like it or don't like it. It's very important because they are, let's say, enable the communication between the politicians, policymakers, and the public, including social networking and social networks and their role. So I think that's the final thing I would like to stress. Everyone should be invited to this debate, or every voice should be heard, and no voice should be omitted anyway. So that's not the club style debate, as the broad debate with the, let's say, with the feeling of everyone of the general public that the people are not omitted, they are invited, we count on them anyway. and politicians count on them. This is extremely important just in this time. Thank you.
I thank you indeed. Build political trust, engage businesses in the sustainability transition, enable them to report with regards to the SDGs, enable them to report to their shareholders with regards to their financial profits, but also with regards to their impact on the environment and society, and at the same time create financial institutions that mobilize this sustainability transition, that monitor those who they finance according to the SDGs. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And finally, I would like to ask Prime Minister Zlatko Ganjavi. I am terrible with names, but Zlatko, please give us your final remarks. Thank you.
First point, to catch up and follow on what Petra was saying with maybe another wording, we have to try to open the process of searching for new normal and new narrative for Western Balkan 2030 along the path of European Union 2030 and Agenda 2030. So new narrative that is based on looking for Western Balkan 2030 to be corresponding with European Union and with Agenda 2030. That's one thing. Second thing is strengthen the alliance of multi-stakeholders in every aspect of the meaning through sustained development social network and creating the nodes on national level and regional level and intra-regional level. If we can have, for example, Western Balkan, you would be, Phoebe, perfect member of our leadership council, so to speak, as someone who's coming from Greece and is active in that context. So to make some kind of, let's say, network of networks like the SDSN in generally is. As a tool to basically speaking, create awareness and working on a new narrative for Western Balkan on very concrete principles. So putting together hearts and minds, if we can put it that way. If Agenda 2030 is about minds, then we have to search for the hearts as well through some kind of new narrative which putting these things together. And the next thing is, I think it's great that we have green agenda for Western Balkan. It's great that we have economic investment plan for Western Balkan that was adopted by European Commission in October this year, which includes Green Deal for Western Balkan. But since a year ago, we had a European Green Deal. I think that Western Balkan Green Deal has to be part of European Green Deal. So it's no European Green Deal as one entity and Western Balkan in one entity, because Green Deals do not understand passports and Schengen visas, okay? So Green Deals are overlapping the atmosphere, the territory, the air, and everything. So environment doesn't understand Schengens at all. So that's the reason why I think that we have to see how we can, let's say, open the doors of European Green Deal for Western Balkan Green Deal more. The same thing would apply. Of course, we have to do Western Balkan investment plan for the Western Balkan and economic integration of Western Balkan. But at the same time, we have to see before we get to the membership of European Union, why we wouldn't be, let's say, members of economic space of European Union. Why we wouldn't do that thing that would be some kind of interim thing. And the last point is, I think that it is very important that we learn the lessons from COVID. European Union should learn the lessons from COVID. Globe has to learn lessons from COVID. We did not fight COVID as a one humanity. Selfishness, greed, big money, big countries, further fragmentations of rich and poor of different parts of the world is on. And as since we are all members of that people's vaccine promoters through NGIC and our network, and Roshan is very, very active in that thing. People's vaccine principle is very simple. No one is safe until everyone is safe. There is no European Green Deal without European Green Deal of Western Balkan being part of the European Green Deal. So in that context, I think we have to learn lessons from the COVID that we should be more oriented to each other and working together. And Phoebe, last point, I mean, there's a Roshan, we have to plan next thing. You see, there are 6 speakers plus our distinguished friend, Professor Phoebe. Out of 7 of us, Roshan, 6 of us are professors. So there's simply no way that we finish on time. And I think the time that we broke is, I mean, not so much. And of course, President Nishani is not professor, but since he's lawyer by profession and trained lawyer, I mean, with all due respect, Boyar, I mean, lawyers are also, at least in my country, they like to speak a lot. So, I mean, we all squeezed ourselves, and speaking only for 2.5 hours, I mean, 7 of us, that's not so long time. At least I'm very privileged and happy, and thank you, Phoebe, for driving us through and actually making all of us break other schedules and stay together. I really appreciate that very much, and I'm thankful to all of you for what I heard.
Thank you so much, Zlatko. I cannot conclude better, obviously. I just want to close by making 4 very quick points. We have a moral responsibility to recover sustainably because future generations are going to pay for this recovery. Recent simulations show that the green recovery, the green and digital recovery is growth enhancing and creates jobs. Beyond our fiscal stimulus, we want to make sure that we don't just boost aggregate demand in order to recover to where we were before, but we transform our public investments towards a sustainable, green, fair, and digital transition. And by transforming our public sector, we incentivize the private sector and come in and at last make investments in the real economy, because in the last 10 years, we are at all-time low with regards to real investments. And of course, like it has been said, genuine stakeholder participation can ensure a democratic oversight, as well as ensure direct public funds towards the most socially desirable uses. I am fully available, me and SDSN network, at least the European hub that I coordinate, but also my research team, which is quite big, is 200 researchers, to work with you because you have both the policy and the science. I have the science. I'm not a politician, but I'm very happy to work with you and structure the information in a way that you can build a narrative that can engage all the stakeholders, politicians, policymakers, NGOs, financial institutions, the civil society, the businesses, so that we accelerate this transition because we don't have a lot of time. Thank you so much, and thank you for your patience because I know I talk too much. Thank you.